Well, I now want to bring in Aya Majdoub. She is a Lebanon researcher for Human Rights Watch, and she joins me live from Beirut. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So your organisation, Human Rights Watch, will release a report next hour on the August 4th Beirut bombing. What all was revealed in that report?
We collected hundreds of pages of official documentation and correspondence between various ministries, security agencies, the president, and the prime minister, and supplemented those with interviews with government officials, security officials, and judicial sources to build a picture of why the ammonium nitrate came to Lebanon in the first place, which Lebanese officials knew about the existence of the ammonium nitrate and the dangers that they posed to public safety but failed to act, and then what triggered the explosion. We found that senior officials, from the president to the prime minister to the former head of the army to former heads of other security agencies, all had knowledge of the ammonium nitrate and the dangers that they posed, but all failed to take the appropriate action to protect the public from the risks posed by that ammonium nitrate.
So who do you think should be held responsible for that blast?
Anyone against whom there is evidence that they knew about the ammonium nitrate and failed to take action within their mandate to protect the public should be held responsible. Unfortunately, the domestic investigation in Lebanon is stalled, and the judicial investigator is having to sidestep various immunities for the president, parliamentarians, ministers, and high level security officials, such that currently the only people in prison, people who have been detained for more than a year now, are relatively low level port security and customs officials.
So why has there been a lack of any real official investigation into the Beirut blast? No answers on how it happened or who was responsible. Is it all about politics?
I mean, the Lebanese justice system has historically been either incapable or unwilling to hold high level officials to account. Over the last several decades, we haven't had accountability for political assassinations, for allegations of torture, for security forces' excessive use of force. We've really seen the judiciary fail to play its role in protecting the public good and holding these high level officials accountable. What we have today in Lebanon is a culture of impunity, where high level officials routinely escape accountability for their grave human rights violations and their corruption. And they use they interfere in the work of the judiciary in ways that have been documented by Human Rights Watch and other organizations to get the outcome that they want. And we're seeing this exact same thing play out with the investigation into the Beirut blast, where all of the political class have banded around each other, protecting each other from the domestic investigation, and effectively telling the victims that they won't have any justice, they won't have any accountability.
So no one taking responsibility, no accountability. Meantime, what has happened to all the people who lost loved ones, homes and businesses in that blast? And they also try to cope with this in the midst of the worst economic crisis and a pandemic.
The scars of the Beirut blast are still very much visible across the entire city. There are still neighborhoods littered with rubble. There are still collapsed buildings on the street. You still see homes with no windows, with just plastic sheets covering their windows where glass used to be. Many people have been made homeless. More than 150 people have sustained permanent disabilities as a result of the blast. But we've seen again and again the government shirk its responsibility and fail to provide any adequate redress or compensation for the people impacted by the blast. The compensation schemes have been discriminatory, they've been not adequate, and they've really left people to fend for themselves, as you say, in the middle of one of the worst economic crises in modern history, according to the World Bank.
So what are you hoping that your organization's report will reveal and perhaps solve? I mean, can it do anything more than just shine a spotlight on this?
First and foremost, we did this report in order to provide some historical narrative, some measure of truth for the families of the victims and the Lebanese public. We didn't want the officials to be able to set the narrative for what happened. Currently, all of the officials have been holding press releases saying that they weren't involved and that they had no knowledge. We wanted really to set the record straight to show which officials knew of the ammonium nitrate and failed to act. We're hoping that, on the one hand, this investigation will aid the current judicial investigator in his battle to lift the immunities off of officials who are implicated in the blast. And on the other, we're hoping that the international community will use this report to see that there were state failures from the highest levels, which amount to grave human rights violations that necessitate a UN Human Rights Council investigation into the Beirut blast. We're also hoping that governments with global Magnitsky sanctions and other human rights and corruption sanctions will impose those targeted sanctions against officials responsible for the ongoing human rights violations resulting from the Beirut blast.
We'll see what sort of solutions come out of this and what consequences. Aya Majoub, thank you joining us live from Beirut. We appreciate it.
Thank you.